There is a lot of content on YouTube and online in general absolutely bashing kit lenses. And when I first started out in photography, I owned a camera setup that's probably familiar to many, a crop sensor DSLR with a 18 to 55mm variable aperture kit lens. And I did what many people advised, which was to quickly move on from the kit lens to something better. So I thought it'd be a really fun idea for my next photography trip to limit myself to using a kit lens. This is an 18 to 55 f2.8 to f4 variable aperture on my Fujifilm X-T5, which is crop sensor camera. So this is a really similar setup. Obviously the technology has progressed quite a lot since I started shooting like 13 years ago, but fundamentally this is pretty much the exact kind of setup that I had when I first started photography. Given that I've been at this for quite a number of years now, I've obviously owned so many different types of lenses, and it's been a lot of fun to experiment and figure out what I like and what suits my style. But I've really warmed to the idea of coming back to a lens like this, using it more often to really work on and improve on the fundamentals of my photography. And also in this video, I'm going to share some of my tips when it comes to shooting with a kit lens and embracing the limitations of a lens like this. So I decided last weekend to head down to Newcastle, which is a beautiful city on the east coast of Australia, one of my favorite places to photograph, and I only used this one lens, the 18 to 55. Okay, so obviously with the kit lens, there's a few things that you can't rely on in order to make interesting photos. First of all, you cannot rely on super shallow depth of field. And this can be a bit of a cheat code for, separating subjects from backgrounds and making cleaner compositions overall. You're really able to remove distracting elements from the photos. So a lot of the time I was actually shooting with a greater depth of field using apertures like f8 and f11. And it just meant that I had to be way more careful with how I compose my images. You have to make sure that everything that is in the frame contributes to the story or the idea of the photo. When you start out with a kit lens, it's a really good idea to focus on the fundamentals of photography. And this is about honing your eye to notice things like composition, color, light, and shape. Now, I won't go into what makes a good composition in depth in this video. There are plenty of other videos on YouTube talking about composition, color theory, and all that good stuff. And I will probably be making more in-depth videos about those concepts in future videos. But one of my top tips when it comes to composition is to keep it simple. Now, as a photographer, I love minimalism. It's kind of part of my style and my aesthetic. So I'm really drawn to scenes that only have maybe 2 or 3 main colors and usually only one main subject. This really simplifies the process because you can really focus on creating a strong composition with only a few elements that you need to arrange in the frame. Another tip is just look for interesting light. I really love shooting on sunny days in direct sunlight because you can really play with light and shadow to create shape and really just create some interesting compositions. And to be honest, this was a lot of what I did when I was photographing down in Newcastle. When I first started photography, I learned about all of the compositional techniques that you can use, like leading lines, symmetry, rule of thirds, and I began cramming all these elements into each and every photo. So the photos ended up being like a bingo card of every single compositional element that I could throw at this photo. And the photos looked nice, but there wasn't really any point to them. It was just creating visually impactful photos for the sake of creating visually impactful photos. And I eventually learned that photography is so much more about creating an emotion or expressing an idea. I really love the winter in Australia. It is one of my favorite times of year because in the summers here, it can get unbearably hot and really crazy humid. Plus, it pretty much rains on and off the entire time. In winter, most of the time, the weather is absolutely perfect every single day. And I just love the feeling of the cool air, but then that warm sun kind of hitting your skin in the morning. And I love that people are still out and about, even though it is a little bit cooler. And so my photography was really focused in on just capturing and displaying that emotion. And hopefully I did an okay job. One of my favorite things about going out and using this kit lens is the limitation. When you go out and take photos with a bag full of lenses, your options are limitless. And to be honest, sometimes this can be a bit of a disadvantage because you spend so much time trying to figure out, what am I trying to capture here? Or what am I trying to do? What lens should I use? Should I switch to this lens? Should I try this? Should I try that? And all of these ideas are kind of bouncing around in your head and you're just kind of bouncing from one idea to the other. Whereas with a setup like this, you're kind of limited to a bit of a narrow range of photos that you can take. And it really does force you to get a little more creative, to think outside the box a little bit and try to get the best out of what you have. So I'm going to be shooting a ton more on the kit lens. And if you do own a lens like this and you've been slightly hesitant to go out and take photos with it, hopefully this motivates you to get out there and try to create something that you're proud of. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the tips and the photos that I showed throughout the video. If you do like the way I edit my photos, I also have Lightroom presets, which you can find linked down in the description below. Thanks guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.